Hello and welcome to the More Sports Podcast on the More Than Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Custis Moore. Today was a really good conversation. Had NFL kicker Elliott Fry on the podcast. Any Bengals or Chiefs fans, you might remember him. Elliott filled in for Harrison Butker, I believe, in Week 15, that crazy windy game. And then he filled in for the last game of the season for Evan McPherson. And maybe some of you Falcons fans remember him as well, filling in for Koo last season in 2020. Really good conversation. You can listen to us talk about his NFL career, which has been up and down. Just Google the guy. He's been on 4 rosters this year alone. And he started off in the AAF, didn't really have a chance out of college. Was a great kicker at South Carolina, was the all-time leading scorer for the University of South Carolina. We talked about Steve Spurrier, which is a great conversation. That's about 20 minutes in if you want to listen to that. He had some really funny stories about his coach, Steve Spurrier. But yeah, listen to the podcast. It was a great episode today. Check out the website, morethansports.com, MOORE, thansports.com. It's More Than Sports. We got a couple new people writing some articles for us. Hired on a few people today, which is Tuesday, January 25th. This podcast was recorded around 3 Central. Recording this little intro and outro around 6 o'clock. So enjoy the episode. Check out the website. Check out the podcast. If you are willing to make a donation, there is a donation on the homepage of the website. And if you're interested in applying for any position, if you want to do some social media, make some videos, or just write some articles, be a freelancer. So yeah, enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome to the More Sports Podcast on the More Than Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Custis Moore. Today, with a really special guest, NFL kicker for the Cincinnati Bengals, Elliott Fry. How you doing today, Elliott?
Doing good, man. Appreciate you having me on.
It's awesome to have you. So Elliott and my family actually go pretty far back. Elliott went to Prince Peace Christian School, where I went to high school, from second grade through high school. And then you had a pretty cool relationship with my little brother, which is pretty awesome. He looks up to you a lot. And then my parents think the world of you. So pretty awesome. Pretty cool to see you having some pretty good success in the NFL. But yeah, awesome. I mean, how's it going?
It's good, man. It's a grind. Been out here in Cincinnati for about a month now, so yeah, it's cool. It's been a crazy year. It's my 4th team this year, so
Yeah, that was one of the big kind of talking points was you've been since 2019, you've been on 9 professional teams. According to Wikipedia, you've been on 9 professional teams.
yeah, that is accurate.
And 8 NFL teams. So that's kind of crazy. And then 4 teams really this past season. What's that been like traveling between all these cities?
Yeah, no, it's been crazy. Definitely something, I've kind of gotten more used to just the past few years. It's just kind of been how my career has been right now. I'm still hoping, one day, hopefully next year to be kind of the guy somewhere and kind of have a more steady job and career. But yeah, no, it's been crazy. It's one of those things you never really know what's going to happen. And I was kind of with even this season, it was kind of crazy how it happened. I was with Atlanta, just kind of on the practice squad, just for most of the first half of the year. And then, pretty much just backing up Youngway Koo, just in case he got hurt or got COVID or anything like that, just to kind of be in the building. And then they kind of had some other, needed to bring some more guys in at other positions just with through the season guys going down and stuff. And so hadn't got a call in a few weeks, and then kind of out of nowhere, Kansas City called, and kind of the same thing there. Ended up they were obviously gearing up for a potential Super Bowl run, I think it was week 15, and ended up kind of signing me to the practice squad just in case something happened to Butker. And he ended up getting COVID like right after I got there. So I ended up getting a game in, and usually once you can get a game in and kind of have a good game or do decent, it kind of gets the dominoes falling. And then went from that game to Green Bay for a weekend, and then straight to Cincinnati. So it's been crazy. I haven't been home in like a month. I ended up originally like packing for like 5 days to go to Green Bay, and ended up going straight to Cincinnati. So I still only have like a carry-on suitcase, and just kind of been living out of that for the last month. So it's been a challenge, but it's been good.
That's kind of crazy. I remember you filled in for Koo last year, correct, for a game?
Yeah.
Um,
So week 4 last year, he kind of just had a groin injury and filled in for a game, and then kind of sat there all year on practice squad, just kind of backing him up. So
okay.
yeah.
So if you're on like something I've always wondered, if you're on the practice squad or like the injured reserve or anything like that, let's say the Bengals make a Super Bowl run and Joe Burrow and Jamar hit this huge hot streak. They end up winning the Super Bowl. Do you end up getting a ring if you're on that team?
Everybody who's currently on the team at the time of the Super Bowl does.
Okay.
Um, at least that's been my understanding. It's interesting. Every team is actually very different in how they handle like operations and everything.
Right.
But typically, the rule of thumb is everybody who is on the team. So whether it's practice squad, whether it's injured reserve, whether whatever, if you're in the building when they're going to the Super Bowl, you get a ring if they win. So
Okay.
that would be
Cool.
pretty cool. I had another kicker that I know pretty well, Greg Joseph, kind of had that similar thing last year in Tampa. So he was on
Yeah.
Tampa practice squad the entire year, ended up getting a Super Bowl ring out of it. So not
That's
too bad.
no, not too shabby. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, because I was reading about it like trying to figure it out, but there's no set rule for the NFL like a lot like the NBA. If you play a certain amount of games with the team that season and end up getting traded, if they win the championship that year, you end up getting a ring. So there's been cases where like
Interesting.
whenever the Cavs and Warriors played like 3 years in a row, there was someone who was traded from one team to the other who was going to get a ring either way. Like they were going to get one either way because they were on both teams. So I just didn't know how it worked. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, actually, I didn't know that about the NBA. Yeah, there's nothing um, in our collective bargaining agreement about it, but it's definitely interesting. I think the NFL is different than a lot of sports where I actually don't know this about other sports, obviously, because I haven't, been at that level at anything else. But just the way that different teams operate and the way that different teams handle everything is completely different. Everywhere I've been, just day-to-day stuff, schedules, how people communicate with each other. I mean, it's all very different. It's really like 32 individual businesses where going into it, I thought it was kind of like one standard,
Right.
everybody does everything the same way. And even just from like food and nutrition and, you know, um, just everything, therapy, like all that stuff is completely different within every organization. So
And I'm sure you've seen that having been on, 8 teams in the NFL in 3 years.
yeah, you definitely see a lot of different organizations.
Well, cool. I'm glad you're having success, man. We watched that Chiefs game. What was that week 14? What week was that? Week
I think week 15
okay.
or
We
week.
watched that game and the announcers, I think it was Romo and Nance, were talking about how windy it was and just how bad was that? What was it like kicking in that? Was it a little stressful being a
Yeah,
fill-in?
that was by far the toughest. Well, at that point, when I played Cleveland in the last game here, it was extremely tough too. But I obviously played in the SEC, back at South Carolina. So I've been fortunate to have not had to kick in the toughest conditions.
Right.
At least in college coming into it, and the AAF, when I went through that, it kind of prepared me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it was like that was by far the windiest game I'd ever played in. I mean, it was something where typically in the NFL, you're everybody hits a good enough ball that it's not going to move too much in the wind, you know,
Right.
to where when you see, if you watched a couple of extra points in that game, you could see there was a lot of movement. And when you see that, you kind of know like if guys in the NFL balls are starting to move, you kind of know like, wow, it's got to be pretty windy because at this level, that doesn't happen too much. And for me, having to play field goals like outside of the uprights is a very scary thing for a lot of kickers. There's not too many times in your life you ever really have to do that.
Right.
But that game was even as close as an extra point where you're like you're having to play it pretty on that upright or close to it, and like hopefully this wind does do what it's supposed to do. Because one of the field goals I missed actually, like that's the tough thing is then you play for that wind and then the wind stops and it stops gusting or something. And
Right.
that actually happened to me on one of the field goals I missed. Is I kind of played for it and then it didn't go. So it's tough. It's really tough to navigate it, but Arrowhead's also just a tough place to kick in general. It's usually pretty windy there, so
Yeah.
a lot of
But
respect for Butker's
I
what he does there.
yeah, the video you posted, I think you posted a video on Instagram of one of your kicks or whatever, and then Romo was kind of praising you afterwards, like, "Oh man, that's such a good kick" or whatever. Just in these, it was like a 40-something yarder, um, and he was like, "Wow, that was a really good kick, just in these conditions."
Yeah, I like
So
that. Obviously, being from Dallas, I remember getting that video right after the game, and I was like, "Man, that's pretty cool." Like hearing Romo announce it, and everything. Growing up, like watching him, I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool."
yeah, that was the idol, man. That's awesome though. Is it? I mean, traveling between all these cities has it been kind of a drain? I mean, from Atlanta to Kansas City to Green Bay to Cincy.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really tough to you know to perform at any level, like at a pro level doing anything. It's very hard to not be like in a routine. I think that's something that makes it a lot easier when you're on a team and you kind of have that, day-to-day routine of, hey, Tuesdays I'm doing this, Wednesdays I'm doing this, and it's a lot easier, a lot more comfortable. It's definitely a lot harder to come into like a new building, trying to learn everybody's names, trying to get used to the snap and the hold, trying to just get, even simple things just like nutrition. You're like trying to figure out, you've been traveling for 2 days. What do I need to eat to make sure, I'm ready to roll? How am I hydrated and just everything? It's tough to do, honestly. It's definitely really draining. It's tough, but you know, gotta gotta figure out a way to do it.
Right. Well, yeah, there was an article that came out on ESPN, maybe a month or two ago about you. Someone had written one, like the up and down life of Elliott Fry, I think is what it was called. And it was just about you being called up, sent back down, picked up by another team, called up, sent back down, picked up by another team.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting article. It's kind of cool. See someone I played. We played Call of Duty together that one time. Do you remember that upstairs in my game room? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was really funny. I don't know. Well, cool. So backtrack a little bit. Man, when you were in high school, did you ever think you'd be kicking in the NFL? Um,
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it was, I've always been pretty realistic with myself. I've always, um, they talk, if you ask a lot of kickers, a lot of guys in the league, and they talk about just taking it day by day. You're not, of course, everybody's looking, you know, trying to shoot for the pros and shoot for the Pro Bowl and try to shoot for the Hall of Fame and everything. But it becomes really hard if you're focusing on that, not just focusing day to day. And I think I've always kind of been like that. In high school, it was, man, if I could just get to South Carolina, like that would be the coolest thing ever. And then it was, man, if I could just play a game in college, like in the SEC, that would be like the coolest thing ever. And then, those goals start to kind of, those become routine, and it's like, well, I've played a few games. Like, what if I'm have a good year? If I could just have a good year at South Carolina, that'd be awesome. And then, you know, I think my freshman year I was all freshman SEC, and you keep, kind of building on that. And then it's, try to be the all-time leading scorer, try to make it to the NFL, try to be. So I think it's important to always kind of be focusing on, something that, for me, it's just been try to stay in the league, try to. Last year it was just try to get a game in. Now, you get a game. Now it's, hey, get a few more games, get a credited season, get on a team. So I definitely never thought about it when I was in high school. It was always a goal, but I wasn't like, I'm going to make it to the NFL. That's my only option. I've always been like, hey, I'm going to work my ass off to try to get there. But if it doesn't happen, I'm going to have a backup plan. It's going to be okay. Like, I'm just going to succeed at something else. So, yeah,
oh, what year did you graduate high school?
2013.
Okay. So I remember I was in middle school at the time at Prince Peace,
Hmm.
and y'all had varsity practice over on this side. Middle school would have it on the other side for part of that time. And I remember you would kick field goals over our heads while we were practicing, which was I think it was Coach Del Basso or something. And we would all just watch him go by. So that was really cool, just to see you move on. So from high school, what made you want to go kick at South Carolina? Like, why was that the school that you picked?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't have too many offers coming out of college. Honestly, just coming from a small school, like Prince of Peace, you're not going to get
Right.
a lot of scouts. You're not going to get a lot of um, people looking at you. Whereas, when you go to a big public school and you're with, 8 other dudes who are going D1, there's scouts at those games, there's people at those games. So I only had one scholarship offer, which was to punt at Louisiana Tech. And I knew I was like, I was a pretty good punter. I can still punt, but that wasn't, I was a field goal guy. I always felt like I was best at field goals. And that's what I wanted to do. Um, and I've always wanted to kind of, for me, even going to college, it was always, I'm either going to play on the biggest stage, like a big Power Five school, preferably the SEC. Like I want to do that, or I'm probably not going to do it. And so ended up getting like a preferred walk on offer and, um, just went with that. Thought it was, you know, the SEC. I was like, man, this would be awesome just to be there, and if football doesn't work out, then I'll have fun. They have a good business school, everything like that. So, um, yeah, I mean, I kind of just went there and kind of just rolled the dice a little bit.
Dang, cool. Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, we came and watched you play one game. I remember my brother would come every year, but we went one year. And I visited South Carolina. It was beautiful. It was really pretty campus.
Yeah.
Freaking awesome vibe at the football stadium. I mean,
Yeah.
where I go to school, I'm surprised we won a bowl game while I was in school. So yeah, this year was a huge surprise. We fired our coach midseason and then proceeded to win a bowl game. So yeah, a lot cooler vibes over there in the SEC. But yeah, what was it like playing for Coach Spurrier?
Yeah, I love Coach Spurrier. Me and him had a really good relationship. He he's definitely very unique in his coaching style and his, everything he does. It's almost funny. I think one of the reasons he liked me was just because he like thought he just liked to say my name. He kind of thought it was like just a fun name to say, and if you kind of know Coach Spurrier, he just always kind of goes around mumbling things and he'd always just be like, yep, Elliot, yep. He just kind of, I don't know, for some reason, I think that just stuck in his head. But he's definitely very, very interesting. He's so um, good at football and he's so knowledgeable about it, but he's not like a lot of the coaches these days that are just like all work, and it sounds kind of like bad, but um, he just didn't need to like work that hard, which is crazy. Like he would go play golf. He would recruit and he would, coach and everything, but he also was like, I'm not going to be the coach in the building 20 hours a day, which is like every other coach in college right now. They're just grinding. It seems terrible, honestly, like recruiting and everything. Like it just seems so hard. And he was just never like that. He was always like, I'm going to go play golf. And it's funny, there's a story when I was in the AAF, and this was basically a bunch of guys in the AAF, were either been in the NFL for a while and or just kind of got pushed out or just a lot of really talented people, but a lot of guys who were definitely like NFL level. And especially on our team, and our quarterback was Garrett Gilbert. And
Yeah.
everybody was very used to the way in the NFL, just how prepared everything was and just, play calling and having the scripted plays at the beginning. And I remember, we ended up being like the best team in the AAF. And I remember
Yeah.
for our first game, my locker was right next to Garrett's, and him and our entire offense were freaking out before the first game. They're like, what are we doing? This is going to be like the most embarrassing game ever. Like, we don't have a game plan. And Spurrier walks up to him like literally 3 minutes before kickoff and has like a little scratch piece of paper, like a little napkin almost, with a pen, and just goes, all right, Garrett, what do you want to open with? And like Garrett's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like every team, every team in the NFL, the first 10 to 15 plays are scripted. Like those are, you
Right.
have a
Yeah.
game plan, you have that, and you at least have, some sort of game plan going in for the rest of the game. And there was none of that. And he was just all off the top, and he goes, yeah, let's open with this, and just kind of starts writing stuff down. And what do you like the first play, like I fit like the first drive, we go to score a touchdown, and we end up like having the best offense and like everything. And everybody's like, I have no idea how this works, but and that's what I just mean. He's absolutely brilliant in his mind, but it's just so different than a lot of the other coaches that are either in college or the NFL. So,
Wow. That's
yeah,
really cool. That's a cool story. Just walking up with a piece of paper, like, all right, what do you want? It's like backyard football.
I was laughing. I mean, it was kind of like funny, but like also everybody was freaking out. Like, what are we doing?
Stressed.
The most casual, just, like, what do you want to open with? Like, just asking. Garrett's just looking at him like, what do you mean? What do I want to open with? Like, it was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, you can see it. His career speaks for itself. He's unbelievably good at, what he's done.
Yeah, no, he was a great head coach. He liked all the special teams guys too, right? Because he was a punter in the NFL, right? That's kind of what he.
Well, he like kicked a few field goals in college, but he wasn't really a kicker. I don't know. I think the connection with specialists with him was always golf. So he was like, usually the specialists and the quarterbacks are the best golfers on the team, just because that's typically, who plays golf the most. And he always had that connection with quarterbacks and specialists. And he could relate he saw kicking a lot like golf. And the physics of the swing, kind of the mentality. So I think that's what kind of got him interested in it a little bit.
Cool. That's pretty awesome. That story. That's a good one. Probably one most people haven't heard before. So, well, cool. Yeah, I mean, I remember my brother has like this signed Steve Spurrier thing in his room, and I'm jealous of it because he just seems like a really cool guy to know, really cool guy to be acquainted with. So, yeah, you went to South Carolina. Your last year was 2017.
2016 season.
2016. Okay.
Yeah, so 20 came out 2017 of spring.
Okay. So I mean, what were those first couple years like? Because you didn't have an active roster role until 2019, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, I had completely quit kicking. So I came out 2017, kind of went through the whole process of, just training and everything, getting ready, and just didn't really hear, anything. Just phone didn't ring. I had like a rookie mini camp invite to Tampa,
Yeah.
2017, which at the time I thought was something, but once you've been around for a while, you realize like that's, they'll bring in 30 or 40 guys and they might sign one person off of
Right.
that mini campus. So it's not really, they kind of looked at you, but like, for example, I went perfect the entire weekend there, but they weren't going to sign me because at that time they were choosing between Aguayo and Folk. So they were never going to sign me no matter what. So kind of one of those situations where you're just kind of going to go. But after that, I mean, I didn't hear anything. So after a year, like phone hadn't rang. I was like, I ended up going. So I had not finished college yet. So I had another semester. So went back, did that final semester, and then got a job doing some financial advising in Atlanta. And so I did that until 2019. And then that's when, Spurrier called me one day and was like, hey, come play in the AAF. And he, another funny story, I just told him no. I was like, I'm not playing.
Really?
I didn't know what it was. It wasn't very public yet, like what the AAF was. And I thought it was more like an arena league type thing. And I was thinking like, yeah, players are probably going to get paid like a few $100s. Like I didn't know what it was. And as time went on, it kind of got more publicity, and I saw some of the other kickers that I knew were signed and going to play in it. And ended up being like $70K for like 10 games, which is, as a kid coming out of college, like that's like a lot of money regardless. So my kind of plan was, with the job of financial advising, you basically are making your own schedule. So I kind of was doing that while playing. And my
Wow.
goal was honestly just like, I almost treat this like a summer break. Like I get to go play football for 3 months and make some money. And then I just go back, like obviously meet a lot of people who might have money too. That could be good for the business. Like with
Right.
that. So that was kind of my plan. And then I was going to come back and keep doing financial advising, and it was kind of almost going to be like a little side gig, but ended up having a perfect season in the AAF and got signed
Yeah.
to Chicago right after, which again, I didn't think that it would materialize into anything serious. So yeah,
You were signed to Chicago right after the double doink, right?
right after Parkey. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, nice. Well, cool. Yeah, I remember watching the AF. I'm like, oh wow, like Elliott had missed a field goal. That's pretty cool. But man, you told Spurrier originally no. How did he convince you? Did you just figure out like, oh yeah, this might be something
Well,
fun?
yeah. I mean, it was, I wouldn't even necessarily say he convinced me. Like he called me, told me about it. And again, I don't even think at the time he knew exactly what was like going, like what exactly it was. It's when someone comes at you and says like, "Hey, like join this football league." There's obviously going to be skepticism. Like I don't know, again, what's the payment like? What are we doing? Is this like an arena league type thing, or is this like a legitimate operation? And kind of as time went on, I found out more about it. Um, I had called him back, and he was like, "Yeah, just think about it." And I was like, "Okay, but probably going to be a no." And again, like it had gained a little bit more credibility, at least in my eyes, like over the next few months. I had just known other guys who had signed and, told me kind of what they were paying and what the deal was, and found out like, they're in real cities, like Orlando, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, like a bunch of places
Right.
that honestly I would think like, wow, that's actually a really good idea. None of those places have pro football. San Antonio, which like that's a great place to put a semi-pro, or a smaller pro team. Like
Right.
places like that, or Orlando, like there, I think it's a really good idea anyways. And so that kind of convinced me a little bit. So
Yeah, and I mean, it was a fun league to watch. It was legitimate football. And it gave, I mean, like Garrett Gilbert, was phenomenal when he was playing in that league, and he's still on. I think he's on the Washington football team right now.
yeah, well, there's a
He's
lot of D. Ernest Johnson for the Browns. I just played against him in the last game, and I mean, we were just talking about it. I mean, there was a lot of guys on that team that ended up, I would pretty much say almost everybody on our team, like who started, got NFL, at least invited to a training camp. Most of them were on rosters that next year. Um, I mean, it was good. And I think the other thing too is like the idea, I think if you could get the business side of that secondary league, um, I think that could absolutely succeed.
yeah,
Like you look at those towns, like I remember when we went to San Antonio, there was 25,000 people at the game. I mean, which like they packed out. I think it was like what it's called, like the Alamo Dome, but that was completely like packed out. Like it was loud. I remember playing in that game and thinking like, wow, I did not, like, I haven't heard stuff like this since I was in college. Just like the noise. And I think obviously if you had followed the AAF and kind of know how it unfolded, and what happened, it was almost like a little fire fest,
yeah,
with the owner and the management. But I think if it were run correctly, I think it would absolutely succeed.
yeah. And I mean, there was a lot of talks, and it kind of spurred the rebuild of the XFL, which ended up falling apart before it even got together. Um, were you drafted into the XFL?
I was, but it was one of those weird things where it's like you can say yes or no, and um, yeah, at that time it was kind of, I was in the NFL at
Yeah.
that point, so it was like I appreciate it, but like I'm not gonna go do that instead of. I thought I had a lot better chance at signing a futures deal the next year than than playing in that. But even that though, I mean, like COVID really kind of ruined that. Like,
Yeah.
I think if COVID never happened, that league probably, I mean, I guess who knows if it would have made it, but I mean, they had a lot of momentum too. And I think that was probably had a little bit better ownership and stuff. So,
Yeah. Because I mean, we watched it like AAF, and there were a lot of talks of turning these leagues into like the NBA G League or like a minor league system, because the NFL has like, I guess, the spring league, which I don't know anything about.
not a real, that's, yeah.
Yeah. And
The spring league is basically non existent. I wouldn't even, that would be like, yeah, I talk about this all the time with people is just, you do look at every other sport and they do have a farm system. They do have a league to develop players. And it's very interesting that the NFL doesn't have that. And it's really tough. And it's honestly really tough for specialists because teams typically only carry one.
correct.
So a lot of other positions, you come out of college and maybe you're not ready, but they put you on practice squad and you can develop for a year, but you can gain trust in them over a year of you showing them like, hey, I belong here. I'm putting in the work. I'm doing it. You can develop and get better on practice squad. But typically, they don't do that with kickers and punters. So if you're not playing your first year, like it's very hard to get in.
Right.
So it's interesting. I don't know if I think the other thing with football that makes it hard though is just the other sports, just the brutality of football.
Yeah.
It's very hard with like money wise with insurance and stuff like that and liability. Just with guys aren't gonna go get murdered for 80K a year. Like and that's if you got 80K a year. But like
Right.
it's very hard to convince guys who are like world class athletes. You might get a few, but to build like a whole organization to have guys go and play with that same like tenacity is going to be very hard while not being able to pay them like as much as the NFL. Because I mean, if you look, I know everybody knows like football is physical, but like
Right.
on the field, like in watching a running back going through a game, I mean, it looks like the worst thing ever. Like I don't know how I don't know how they walk. I've had to make a tackle in a game. I've had to, be tackled in a game. I mean, it like sucks. Like it hurts just like getting hit once. And guys who do that, 20, 30 times a game, I have no idea how they're able to walk. I mean, it's crazy.
That's why, I mean, running backs nowadays, I mean, look at like Todd Gurley or Devontae Freeman. Both of them were studs for like 3 years and then just knees injuries. And they're 20, 27, 28 years old, and they don't have a roster spot in the NFL because they just can't take the beatings anymore.
I mean, it's crazy. And you look at a lot of the things players do to try to stay healthy and try to avoid the pain. But again,
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be very hard to sign people up who are at that level to be like, yeah, go do this for $40,000 or $50,000 instead of $1 million. Like
Right.
it's a very different pay scale, and then you just have a lot of other things that complicate it, which I think a lot of other sports, again, like the other thing I remember that's what they were talking about in the AAF was nobody is going to be able physically to go and play 10 games and then turn around in 3 or 4 months and then play an NFL season of
Right.
potentially 22 games. Like that's physically like impossible. You can't do that in a year.
Right.
And like be healthy. Like you just can't. Whereas, other sports are just different where, baseball, you can play 2 games a day. I mean, Jesus, they have 10 games a week where, you can physically do that. You can play baseball in the spring and you could make that transition and keep going. It might be hard, but you could do it. You
Right.
can't do that with football.
No, I did not play at the talent level of the NFL, but I did play offensive line in high school, and I can't imagine playing like
Yeah.
like a like a Jadeveon Clowney or any of those big. I just can't imagine being hit by those people. And I mean,
Thing too is like everybody thinks about it though, like, well, it's big guys hitting big guys, but like that doesn't take away the pain.
no.
Like, you know what I mean? Like whether I'm I'm like 6', 190. Whether I'm that size or 240 pounds, if a dude is running a 4.4 at me and he's 240 pounds, it is going to it's going to be tough
It's gonna
on your
hurt.
on everything, regardless of how big you are. And so like when you look at just some of these linebackers and D linemen who are that fast and big, just trying to kill you, like it's not. I don't know how those guys do it.
Yeah, it's insane. And the thing with that is like all these other like minor league baseball, but minor league baseball has been around since the early 1900s. Like it's been developed for a long time. They don't carry. It's not a 53-man roster plus a practice squad, like the NFL is. Um, I mean, it's a max of like 30 guys is basically what's on your team. And then basketball, I mean, the NBA most teams only carry a max of 14 players. So the G League really wasn't that hard to start. And those guys, they don't get paid great, but again, I mean, they're not taking the toll on their body. It's much less players. But I mean, it could be a really cool opportunity for like it'd be cool. If some of the smaller cities like had a minor league football team or whatever.
No, I think it could absolutely work. I mean, again, I already said it, but I mean, we were packing out. We had 20,000 every week in Orlando. At San Antonio, I mean, you expect like a place like San Antonio, I think is perfect. But Salt Lake City, San Diego, now that the Chargers moved, like there's a lot of places, especially down kind of around where it's a little bit warmer. Those people will show up to the games. Those people will go and they will get behind it. I mean,
Right.
I still think it's crazy that we had 20,000 people at our games, and it was like, nope, like nobody knows anything about the players. Nobody knows.
Right. Right.
Obviously, all the fans are just overnight fans, But it was crazy to me to see people showing up in numbers like that for, again, a team that literally showed up overnight. So I think that could all work at some level. I think it's just logistically pretty tough, but
Yeah, it is. But I mean, the NFL, I think, brings in more money than any of the other leagues, just in general in the U.S. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy. Be really cool if there was some sort of system.
yeah.
But yeah, all right. I think now's a good time to take a break. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Just left off. I do have a question. Out of from college to the AF to the NFL, where's the coolest place that you've played so far?
I think Lambeau and Soldier Field are two of the coolest places. I think my first game ever, I'm probably biased by that because that was my first like regular season game. It was
Right.
Monday night, even though there were like no fans there, but that stadium is so big and like cool. And it's got that just really cool thing going on that I don't think a lot of other places have, where you have the history and you have that kind of the past of Lambeau and how how much history it has in it. But also they've just done so many new renovations and just how big it is and stuff, and you kind of have that really cool mixture of kind of the past and the present. I always thought that was a really cool place. And then Soldier Field, just as a kicker, like that's always kind of known as one of the tougher places to kick.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of the city of Chicago. I really like Chicago while I was there, and just the way they have their stadium kind of situated like right on the lake, right downtown. You're kind of right in the heart of the city. I thought that was really cool too.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. What was it? So you kicked for the Ravens for a preseason, right?
Yeah, just 1 week.
Did you get to meet Justin Tucker?
Yeah, I spent some time under him. Yeah, man, he's a freak.
Yeah, he's incredible. What was it? Was he a cool guy to talk to and stuff? I mean,
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's something I've been really fortunate to be around, like a lot of very, very good kickers. Like if you kind of look at who I've had the opportunity to be around, it's Justin Tucker, been behind Young Wei Koo, and obviously this year, Harrison Butker a little bit, and Evan McPherson here, who's I think is a really good rookie.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a stud.
I think he's yeah, he's a freak. He's really good too. But the crazy thing is, like, I don't think too much in sports you get a consensus by all other um, people in it, like how good Justin Tucker is, and like to be a kicker, you kind of have to be you have to be very confident. You have to pretty much border on being cocky. Like you have to, just to be able to like go out and not have any doubt when you go out to kick.
Right.
But to take all those guys who are, and some kickers are a little bit more cocky and arrogant than others, but everybody will admit that Justin Tucker's like on another playing field.
Yeah.
Like when you ask anybody, they say like, you just talk to anybody and they might be in a Pro Bowl this year. They might be whoever they are. They'll be like, I don't know how that dude does what he does. Like he's just a different breed. He's just above everybody else. And it's kind of like that consensus, like Justin's up here and then we're all fighting for down here on like who's, who's the best after him. So
Right.
um he's an interesting dude, but he's just so good. He's very detailed. He's very um he really is a unique guy, just him as a person. But yeah, man, he's just really, really good at what he does.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, he kicked that 66-yarder this year, and I was just floored that he made it. I'm like, that is insane.
Yeah.
Just what he did. But we had when I at Tech this year, I work in broadcast, so I was on the field running a camera, and our kicker Jonathan Garibay, who was
I saw that kick.
yeah,
Was that what was it 61 or something?
62 yards in college.
Yeah.
And we were like, no, there's no way he's hitting this, and he did it. And I'm working on the field, and there's a video that I took because I wasn't on camera at the time, but we stormed the field with the camera acting like we were working. We were kind of jumping around, excited. Um, and those are the coolest moments in sports. The game-winning field goal is honestly one of the coolest moments. You had at least one in college. I remember the one against Vanderbilt.
Mhm.
What was that like? I mean, being in that environment, people around you everywhere. You're the only guy on the field that really matters in this moment. What is that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it's one of those things that like kind of that's why you do it. That's kind of what everybody wants. I would say, if you're, I don't really know any kickers who don't want to be in that moment. If you don't want to
Right.
be in that moment, you're probably not gonna make it. Like, well, make the kick or make it as a kicker.
Right.
Um, but it's interesting. I think people look at kicking a lot and they think about all the pressure, and they think about it, but I think a lot of guys are similar, and especially me too, that like number one, a kick happens like so fast. Like the time that you're kind of, oh, we're kicking it to go out and do it happens so quickly that there's not a lot of time to be nervous. And obviously that can get obviously in big situations like there's the ability to get nervous. But I think, guys who are really good at it, um, are almost in their own head to where you obviously are aware that it's a game winner, but you're not really thinking of it. You're not thinking about that at all. You're kind of locked into just the input. You're not
Right.
really focused on making the kick. You're focused on different. Guys have different. Like things that they're focused on during a kick. One guy, might have his follow through, like thinking if I just go and I do the follow through that I usually do, it'll go in. And for me, it's like contact. I'm like, if I just hit this ball on the middle of my foot, right where I want it to, like everything will take care of itself. And so you kind of have different like flags and stuff that you're thinking of. And so in those moments, I think again, most guys who are successful about it are kind of thinking of other things. You're not thinking about it and you're not like looking up and going like, oh God, okay. You're not thinking about it like, man, if I miss this, I'm screwed or whatever. You're kind of you really zone in and you really lock in. At least that's how it is for me. You're not really thinking of, I like to think of it as you're not really thinking of the output, you're thinking of the input, and I'm just focused on kicking the ball And I know that all the training, all the hard work and everything will basically, if I do this little thing, it'll happen. So yeah, it's interesting. I'd say and I've talked to a lot of other kickers, but you get a lot more nervous watching film or like rewatching a game, and you'll be like,
Right.
oh my God, like I can't believe, like, and the announcers are building it up too, and they're like, oh man, this kick for the game. And you're sitting there, you're like, oh my God, that's so much pressure. But in the moment, you don't really, at least I think for a lot of guys, you don't typically feel it too much. So
Cool. Interesting. I don't know. I guess it might just be stressful for me because they're doing all the dramatic camera angles at home. And then you got Nance and Romo going, oh my God, this is for the game. Like they did
yeah,
the other
I
night.
think that makes it a lot more too. But I also just think like when I'm running out on the field, like when you, again, like I said, like it happens in like the span of 20 seconds.
Right.
You think about like how quick that is and how like, when I'm running out on the field, I'm like, I'm running. So I'm not thinking about the kick, right? I'm like, I'm going, okay, what is this? Find the spot. That's 42-yarder. All right, take your steps back, pick your line. Like, okay, I'm aiming, what's the wind doing? Okay, I'm aiming at this in the, in the background. Take your steps over, and like all of a sudden, like, okay, like I'm giving the nod to go. And so I think while all that's happening, the viewers at home are obviously getting the TV version where they're making it like a movie, and they're making it
Yep.
like with all the camera angles, and you have the announcers going this to send them to the AFC Championship, and this to do all this. But it really it happens so fast when you're out there that I don't know. At least for me, it's just it's just kind of another kick.
Well, I guess that's a good mentality to have if you're not like super if you're shaking as a kicker, I feel like that might throw some things off.
Yeah, yeah. You
But
definitely don't want to be nervous going out there.
I can't imagine. Oh my God. I couldn't stand in the middle of like Arrowhead right now and go kick. I'd
Yeah.
look around. It'd probably freak me out a little bit.
I
Um,
remember though my very first kick in college, I was like nervous out of my mind. I remember because like obviously coming from like a really small school, we had 200 people at our game, and I
yep.
went from like that to ended up being like a true freshman playing, and now we were like the first game of the entire season on like a Thursday night versus North Carolina, and we were good at the time. We were not
Yeah.
the recent Carolina. That was when we were like ranked 8 or 9 or something. We had Clowney and all those
You want
guys.
like I think it was 11-3 that season or 11-2 maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah. So we were good. And yeah, I remember going out there and like you got 85,000 like like screaming and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, like I hope like I hope this goes in. And I remember like I went in, I just kicked it, and like it went right down the middle, and I was like, okay, well I guess we can do this. Like,
Oh, this is easy.
but yeah, I remember that's I'd say first time in college, you definitely feel the nerves a little bit.
Yeah, I can imagine. That is kind of crazy. Man, first game of the season. So you had a preferred walk on. I'm guessing you didn't expect to be the starting kicker that season.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons I went there was typically in college once a guy is like the starter, it's very hard to unseat him. You know,
Right.
even if he doesn't have a great season, a lot of places are kind of like, that's my, that this is our guy.
Right.
So that was a situation where South Carolina's kicker the year before was a senior, so he was gone. So it was a true kind of competition,
Oh wow.
which is always like what you want to be in. You kind of want to be somewhere where you're not, up against someone who's already been kicking, right? Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to take the guy with experience.
Right.
So I came into camp like third on the depth chart, and just kind of grinded through camp. I remember I like did not think I was going to be playing that season, but I just kind of kept kicking. Like, obviously had a good camp and everything. And I remember like a week and a half before the game, or 2 weeks before the first game, the special teams coach like kind of said like, "Hey, you're with the ones today." And I was kind of like, am I with the ones because I'm with the ones, or am I with the ones to try to get a reaction out of? We had another guy He had done a few kickoffs like the 2 years before. He was kind of like a kickoff guy, and he was like kind of the guy who was supposed to be the starter. And I was like, are you guys just trying to get a rise out of him to try to get like him more, or it's like, is this like a real thing? He's like, no, like you're the starter right now. I'm being like, oh God, okay. And we just kind of took it from there. So it was definitely, yeah, it goes back to kind of what I was saying, like just focusing on the input, just like go to work every day and try to kick as good as you can. And, hopefully you end up getting the job.
Yeah. We had a situation like that at Tech. My freshman year, there was a kicker, Derek Wolf, Trey Wolf. And he was 20 for 22 on the season, field goal wise. So, I mean, he was like 90%. Had a really good year and came in the next year and through the first 3 games was 1 for 5 field goal kicking. Yeah. And so that's the only reason we got that kid who kicked the 62-yarder was because Wolf ended up getting benched. And I was like, man, it's kind of crazy.
Like, and that is pretty, at least for what I'm used to, that's pretty rare in college. Like, I think when I had a good freshman year, but it was like, I would say it was pretty understood that like, that was my job after that freshman year. And like, kind of like nobody's going to be able to unseat me from that unless like I have like a year of 50% or something like.
Right.
And that was kind of the feeling around the building too. Like, I think it's the same thing almost like as a quarterback, like, like if Patrick Mahomes has a bad year, like they're not going to put in the next guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, not that, I guess that's probably a pretty extreme example because that's Patrick Mahomes, but like, I think most places, I don't know, at least that's how it was in South Carolina. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, cool. And I was going to ask, I had a question about practice squad players. So I don't want to ask salary or anything, but like on a weekly basis, how does a practice squad player get paid? Because I've Googled it, found like different things. So how does that work?
I mean, it's all public information, so it's fine. So basically, the NFL, all contracts are paid out week to week. So if you're a starter and you're on $1 million contract, every week that you're there, basically you get 1/17 of that check every week you play. So if you play, 2 games, you make 2/17 of that million. And then if you get cut, that's all you get paid from that, unless you have guaranteed money, like up front, like a signing bonus. But like, so all contracts are basically paid out over game to game. So like when you go in, like if like you'll sign like a minimum salary right now is like 620 or something around there, like 620,000. So if you go and you play 4 games, you'd get 4/17 of that. But if you get cut after that, that's what you get. You don't make that full like 660 for the year if you only play 1 game. Okay. Now, if you go on to IR, there's a piece of the contract where it usually works out like you get paid 80% of that number every week that you're on IR. Practice squad is different. So practice squad is just a straight up number that every week you're there. If you're on the team past Tuesday at 4, so like if you're in the building, if they haven't cut you by Tuesday at 4, you get paid for that week. And that's $9,200 a week right now. And that'll go up. I think next year it jumps up like a bunch to like 11 something. But so so you get paid week to week basically. So again, like for me, like if I was on practice squad for 10 weeks and then they didn't bring you in, you get paid for that 10 weeks, that $9,200 a week for 10 weeks. And then, but yeah.
It's not bad. That's a decent amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cool. I just didn't know how it worked because I mean, I can't imagine what your contracts have been like going up and down from team to team.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Well, it's interesting too because it's a lot different than a lot of other sports. A lot of other sports, baseball and basketball, there is a lot more guaranteed money.
Right.
And the NFL, just with how obviously like our union is always fighting, to get us more guaranteed money. but just with the nature of football and it being so injury prone, and you just know that any guy can go and tear his ACL or whatever, or get hurt pretty bad, that they try to stay away from guaranteed money. Whereas like baseball, when you sign like a $300 million contract, you're getting that $300 million. Patrick Mahomes' contract of $500 million, he probably won't see half of that. That's all like incentives based. It's all like other stuff. It's riders in there. There's not a lot of just in other sports. It's just completely different. Like when you sign that number, you get that number. Even for anybody, like if you sign a 5-year, $20 million deal and you get cut after year 3, you probably only made, 10 million, which I mean, obviously
Only.
that's a lot of money. Like, you just see a lot less of that money in the NFL unless you really fully play out the full.
Okay. So if you were on a practice squad one week and they brought you up, are you making 1/17 of that minimum salary?
Rookie minimum salary. Well, I'm sorry, not rookie minimum, but whatever your accredited season is. So like there's different minimums for how many years you've had in the league.
Yeah, right.
For each. So if you've been in the league for 6 years, you're not making the same as a first year player. So yeah, when you play in a game, if you're on the active roster or unactive, if you have moved up to active/inactive for a game, you'll get 1/17 of that, whatever number is that. Yeah.
Well, cool. I didn't know that. Interesting. Thanks for the information, I guess. Well, cool. We're bordering here on an hour, but I mean, we could talk about walk with type 1 if you'd like. That'd be pretty cool. Pretty prevalent in my family's life. So yeah, I mean, if you want to explain it for a second, I mean, you do like a 60-second rundown
of what exactly,
what it is, or what type 1 is. You could probably give a better definition than I could, and then I guess just explain how you've dealt with it, going from playing sports your whole life. So
yeah, so like Thompson, your younger brother, I'm type 1 diabetic. So basically my pancreas doesn't produce insulin. So insulin regulates your blood sugar. So basically I have to take shots, or some people have a pump where you have a little tube in you that pumps insulin into you every time you eat, or basically digest any carbs or sugar. And you kind of have to test your blood sugar to just make sure all that's in range. But yeah, so I've had it since I was 7. So I got diagnosed pretty early, but definitely is not an easy thing to live with. I think you definitely gets easier over time, the more it just becomes routine. But it's definitely always been a challenge with football. I think I've gotten to a place now where it's very just normal to me. But when most guys are, really focusing on the game and everything, I've also got to be focusing on what are my blood sugars at. If you go too low or too high, that can obviously be bad for your health, and even potentially death. But also it can, if you're not in the right range, for me as a kicker, if you're not in that right range, it would be very easy to miss a kick with low blood sugar. If your blood sugar is out of the range it should. I think most people know the feeling of having like low blood sugar to some extent. But again, it's something where if you have to go kick one of those game winners, like all of them in this past weekend of football, and your blood sugar is low, there's no like, hold on, let me get this up. You got to go out and do it. So it's always been really important for me to kind of have to put that at the forefront of everything I'm doing on game day, just making sure that everything's, in control and where it needs to be, so that I can go out and potentially not miss. So, yeah.
Do you wear a continuous glucose monitor?
Yeah. So I wear the Freestyle Libre. Actually, that company sponsors me, so I get a bunch of Freestyle Libres. So that's pretty
cool. Adrenaline in games, does that mess with the blood sugar reading? Like, does it spike ever?
I've never had that. I know that's prevalent but adrenaline has never affected my blood sugar, which
Interesting.
I know it does for most people, but I don't know. It's
You're
never
just
been a
calm. You're just cool, collected.
I mean, I do. I mean, definitely do get a rush when you're out there, but it's
Yeah.
just never, and especially now with the technology, like you were talking about, the continuous glucose monitor that I wear. You can really see like real time, like, oh man, like this kick happened at 7:06 p.m. Like, what was my blood sugar at that exact time? And so, um, that's been kind of cool to see what's going on through a game. But yeah, I typically nothing happens for me with adrenaline or anything.
Interesting. It does with Thompson because, like, if we're at a football game or it's usually football, baseball isn't as stressful. Um, but my parents would be sitting there like, oh, he must be stressed. His blood sugar just like spiked up to 350 or whatever. When he was playing the whole game at like 150 or whatever it was. So interesting.
It's interesting that it's different for everybody. A lot of diabetics have different quirks and things that works for them and doesn't work for them. And yeah, it's definitely a weird little disease.
Yeah, and every time I come home, and he's bigger than me now. I mean, he's 5'10", probably still growing. I'm easily 5'7" in boots. So he's bigger than me. I mean, he's 17. He'll be 18 here in May, and he's heading off to Tech too. So it's just weird. I come home and I remember my parents used to be so on him about a lot of stuff, and now my parents still are because he doesn't take care of himself as well as he should. Giving shots after he eats every time, or just eating food and like just not doing anything until his blood sugar's too high. I'm like, dude. But he knows what he needs to do now. It used to be a huge panic if his blood sugar was low, and he's like, I'm going low. If you're only
Yeah,
100, I'm going low. All right.
yeah.
So
Well, that's the thing I know with parents going to college and stuff. Kind of having to not being around him, knowing that you're off somewhere and
yeah,
stuff in college that you don't, as a parent, I know you just don't have any control over. Whereas if he's living in your house and something goes wrong, you're right there. So
yeah.
it's gotta be. They're probably thinking about that coming up.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Oh man, I'm sure my brother's gonna love that I talked about him on here and dropped his name and made fun of him for not taking care of himself. But Camp, yeah, Camp Sweeney's gonna be all mad at him. But cool. Well, thanks for coming on today, man. Thanks for talking. Really cool. I learned a lot. So learned all about NFL salaries. It's so confusing whenever I try to read about it.
I still don't know all the ins and outs. I really don't. If you tried to read through our CBA, our collective bargaining agreement, it's like 400 or 500 pages, and it's just all lawyer stuff, like all lawyer talk, and it makes no sense.
Well, that's fun.
A lot of stuff in there. That's why you gotta have a good agent.
Correct.
Figure it out for you.
All right. Thanks for coming on today, man. Hope to have you on in the future. This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the More Sports Podcast on the More Than Sports Podcast Network. It was a really fun conversation. Really cool to see Elliott. Good conversations. So yeah. Check out the website, morethansports.com, MOORE, thansports.com. It is More Than Sports. If you haven't got it yet, it's kind of just a play on my last name. I don't think I've explained that on the podcast yet. But yeah, things are looking up for More Than Sports. Hired a couple people to do some articles, anywhere from the NBA, the NFL, and then also have some people doing some hockey articles, NHL stuff. Future looks bright. But yeah, apply if you haven't. If you're interested, it's on the website. There's an application page. And get in contact with me. Thanks for listening today. Come back next time.